Chris Hensley is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member of FINRA SIPC, investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Houston First Financial Group are not affiliated.
The Houston Midtown chapter of the Society for Financial Awareness presents Money Matters with your host, Christopher Hensley.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Money Matters. Happy New Year. We are now in 2020. That's hard to say and hard to get used to there. You are listening to KPFT Houston. I am Chris Hensley. I am the host. We got a great show lined up for you today. Used to be when people would rob someone in an alleyway, it would be an individual person with a knife. They would rob you, take your wallet. Fast forward many years, mass transit, trains, the railway, and when they decided to rob you, they would rob and scale. They would pull over the entire train. They would come out with the guns blaring, and they would rob everybody. Crooks have now gotten smart, and fast forward to present day, cybersecurity, when we have people, thousands of people getting their identity stolen, their credit card information stolen, and it's done en masse with thousands of dollars of liability to the individuals and to the companies involved. Our guest today is Andrew Rossow. He is a lawyer and host of the new podcast Cyberbite, where we will do a deep dive talking about cybersecurity, some of the recent laws in California that was just passed. So please stay tuned. Keep listening. He will be joining us very, very shortly. But if you are a longtime listener, you know that we always use just the first few moments of the show to tell you a little bit about what's going on in the Houston and the Gulf Coast area when it comes to financial literacy. Well, and you know that I am an active member of Houston Money Week 2020. So now we're calling it Houston Money Week 2020, not 2019. It's going to take place in April, and we are ramping up to get there. There's a lot of different events that we do as a group, a coalition. Houston Money Week is a group of nonprofits, local banks, city government, schools that get together during Financial Literacy Month in April to put together Houston's representation of that. We have been going well past 10 years now, and each and every year it has grown and gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. One of the events that I want to talk about today that we've done for, I want to say, the last 4 or 5 years is a partnership with the Houston Hispanic Forum. They have it coming up in February, so that's not too far away. It's hard to say. We're already here in January of 2020, so not too far down the road, Saturday, February 8th at the George R. Brown Convention Center. They are going to be having the 34th Annual Career and Education Day, which Houston Money Week as a coalition or as a group has participated in the last 4 or 5 years. This is a really great event. It is free and open to the public, so that's one of the few rules we have with Houston Money Week is that there's no sales, that everything is free. This is in the same vein or same mission as Houston Money Week in the sense that if you live here in Houston and you know the George R. Brown Convention Center takes up roughly about 2 city blocks. It's gigantic. And so on this Saturday, they will fill the convention center with students, junior high, high school students who are coming in to learn about their choices about college, how they will pay for it, scholarships, financial aid, but they also have the ability to kind of interview different job positions that they want to take. So there are career panels with FBI agents, career panels with local NASA representatives, the STEM engineering and science all throughout Houston, oil companies, you name it. There are different organizations and groups that are involved where they will actually allow the kids to kind of interview and see what a day in the life is in the type of career that they're thinking about choosing, as well as college planning. I know, I want to say last year, but the year prior to that, the mayor was there to kick it off. There were several city councilmen there as well. And they even have free lunch and child care. So if you have a toddler and you wanted to bring your high schooler there, don't worry, they have you covered. So you can go to HoustonHispanicForum.org to find out more about that. And this is something that we've done with Houston Money Week, our partnership here in Houston, which is HoustonMoneyWeek.org. With that, let's go ahead and get Andrew on the line and do kind of a deep dive into this cybersecurity topic here. Andrew, are you there?
I am, Chris. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So I'll kind of start the show the same way each and every week, as I'll share your bio with listeners so that they can get to know you just a little bit better. Andrew, also known as @CyberGuy ESQ, like Esquire on social media, is a millennial technology attorney, writer, serial entrepreneur, and adjunct law professor based in Dayton, Ohio. In his criminal defense practice, he assists clients in minimizing instances of poor digital hygiene and cases where they find themselves victims of crimes committed through the internet, including social media and other virtual platforms. Andrew, once again, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm a huge fan of the show. Being a native of Dallas, I'm very aware of your Houston show. So.
Love it. I love it. So you're from Dallas there.
I am. I've had the same 214 number since I was 13 years old.
Nice.
So.
Well, can you tell us something maybe outside of the bio so listeners can get to know you just a little bit better?
Sure. As you said, I'm a millennial. I'm 30 years old, and I grew up with technology. I grew up in a time where music started to become digitized with platforms like BearShare, Kazaa, LimeWire. I grew up in the age where social media was born. So before Facebook, there was MySpace. Before MySpace, there was a blog called Xanga, spelled Xanga. And for those who remember Xanga, it was like a WordPress 1.0 blog. There was no interactivity. There was no wall post. It was just, let me post my story, and if you wanted to see what I'm doing in my life, here's the link to my page. So over time, the ability to really watch and observe how technology has evolved over the years and to be part of that from the beginning has been a wonderful experience, but it's also been a little scary at times, and I've always had a passion for it, and I want to give back. I want to give back to the community. I want to give back to those who are harmed by technology.
I love it. Now, before we kind of get into a deep dive about cybersecurity, you just recently launched your own podcast called Cyberbite. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, I did. I launched it on New Year's Day. And Cyberbite is a registered trademark brand of mine. It is a pun on the word cyber and computer bite. So I combined it to read as Cyberbite as your daily news tidbits. And what the Cyberbite podcast does, and its title is Bites, Briefs, and Breaches, is it's targeted towards millennials by a millennial. So your daily news in the world of law, what is trending? What cases are going on right now? And rather than you having to go apply to law school or have to download a brief that takes 20, 30 minutes to read if you've never read one before, is I break it down for you. I break it down in a way that you can understand it, that's fun, that's interactive, and then I share the latest data breaches that you should be aware of. That affects all of us, and really what to do without giving too much, legal advice or any legal advice at all is I make suggestions. So I hope it's a fun show. I hope there's a lot that people can take away from it, and I certainly have fun with it.
Well, I love it. So I'm going to go on my podcatcher and bookmark it now, so because it sounds like stuff that I need to know about. One of the things that when we had talked prior to coming on the show, we were talking about, what topics should we talk about? You mentioned something called the CCPA, which has to do with California's new privacy law. I wasn't even really aware. This had not gotten on my radar yet, and so I think it's probably a good topic for us to talk about. What can you tell us about that?
Sure, and what a great topic it is, Chris, and it affects everyone. It affects you, it affects me. The CCPA is called the California Consumer Privacy Act, and it came into effect on New Year's Day, January 1st. And what it's designed to do is provide the U.S. with its first groundwork for privacy law. For those who are adept in the world of privacy, Europe, for many, many years, has been the model example of what businesses in the U.S. should mirror in terms of infrastructure, in terms of security and encryption. And when the European Union came out with its privacy framework, which is GDPR, or the General Data Protection Regulation, about 2 years ago, the U.S. finally looked its way and said, you know what, maybe we should hop on board. Maybe we should come up with some sort of law or framework that mirrors how GDPR and how Europe has modeled its framework. And thus the CCPA came about. And what it's designed to do is two things, really. One, it's designed to require businesses to specifically identify to each and every consumer that it transacts and does business with how their data is being used. How is it being handled? Where is it being distributed? And secondly, the right to opt out, the right to be forgotten. So, Chris, if you have information out there that you wish you hadn't given out before to a business, or that you, for whatever reason, you just don't want a business to have, under this new law, you have the absolute right to request that that information on you be removed, deleted, no longer available. And that didn't exist before.
Wow, that's huge. You talked about kind of the two facets there. One, just knowing how that data is being used out there, what they are doing, who has it, but also the right to opt out of it, to delete it, if you don't want to participate, to raise your hand and say, I don't want to participate in that. This is just in California right now. Is that right?
Correct. It is in California. The effect of this is that this law is going to have some serious teeth throughout the U.S. We're already starting to see companies, Chris, that are wanting to be CCPA compliant. We have companies like Microsoft and Intel that have already indicated that they are doing whatever they can to ensure that their website, their terms, their agreements are all CCPA compliant. Why? Because at the end of the day, you don't want to play a cat and mouse or a game of chance of, well, I don't really do business in California, or I don't really have any California consumers or customers. That doesn't matter. At some point in time, you will come across a situation where California is a subject. And with Silicon Valley being the forefront of that law, there's no reason why any business should not be CCPA compliant. It is the U.S.'s first attempt at trying to instill a universal framework. And you have states like New York that are starting to follow and say, you know what, we like the CCPA, but we want it tailored for our state. So I think to really get to what you're saying, yes, it is in California right now, but the effect of it will be instrumental throughout the U.S.
I love that. And you had mentioned, what was the other company? You said Microsoft and...
I believe Intel is the second one that I read the other day that's started to expand its transactions, its agreements to ensure that they are staying compliant with the CCPA. And those are just two examples. I mean, I'm sure there's a much bigger list of entities and small, proprietors that are looking at doing this. But again, it's really focused on the larger businesses that are doing at least, $25 million in revenue. And, at the end of the day, small or large, you're going to want to make sure that the information you're collecting from your customers, your consumers, that you're protected, because something will happen eventually, whether big or small, now or in 20 years, something will happen. And whose fault is it going to be? It will ultimately come back to the business owner.
I love the idea of consumer privacy rights. I mean, it's pretty scary when you get into what they're doing with some of the analytics and that you may not be aware that you signed up for in the small disclosure when you logged onto that website. So this is huge. Playing the finance guy and the devil's advocate there. I know in my industry when I'm always anything that's going to be providing transparency or help on the consumer privacy and rights side. I'm always an advocate of that. But there is, however, always a cost. So when companies change their standards and their policies, the fact that you mentioned the two big companies like Microsoft and Intel, I think that's great to see some of the bigger companies kind of step to the front and say, okay, we're gonna start on that. You kind of have to see some of those bigger companies do it and scale it so that the little guys can say, okay, we can afford to get compliant as well quickly. But the point that you made about this is not just a California thing, because if you think about many of the, Austin, California, like different hubs for technology, it is highly likely that a business in some way, your footprint is going to cross one of these companies in California, and so it seems good to be an early adopter on this, even if you're not in California.
Very much so, and to play into your area of finance and money, we all invest as consumers. You yourself invest in these privacy risks, and that's kind of what I was talking about on the launch of my first episode for the podcast. Is we all invest in privacy risks. Why? Because we invest in products that we find are going to be convenient and fun for us to play with, to use on a daily basis, whether it's a smartwatch, a smartphone, a smart home assistant. We all buy into these privacy risks. At the end of the day, the question is, the products that we are buying into, how much of a privacy risk is it? And how big of a risk or chance are we willing to take when something goes wrong?
Wow. That's when you say that, I'm thinking of Black Mirror and Amazon Echo and all this stuff that you just kind of not think about when you push the accept button. That's exactly it. You just kind of not think about it and say, and what are we really giving away there? Let's pivot just a little bit, because one of the other things that you're very much passionate about and involved in is online bullying. Tell us a little bit about how you've been active in that and what that's about.
Sure. Yeah, today with the digital age that we're in and social media, online bullying and trolling is so prevalent, and it's sad. And the problem is that it's no longer contained within the classroom. It follows us home in our pockets with our devices. So what I did was, about 4 years ago, after I passed the bar exam, I found a way through some interviews I was doing, because I'm also a writer, and I believe I was writing for the Huffington Post or Forbes at the time, is a lot of the interviews that I was giving, I had the opportunity to sit down with artists, musicians, actors, actresses that I grew up idolizing, that I went to college listening to at parties and events, and the ability to now sit with them and learn about what they are doing, it sparked an idea that I had. Is a lot of these individuals, they get a lot of heat online every day, whether it's something good that they're doing or maybe something that's not as well received. And I was curious how a lot of these individuals, react to it. They have such a huge fan base. What could they say to fans to help kind of bring things home, to close that gap? Because if you think about it, whether we're talking about Kim Kardashian or, TV stars like Misha Collins from Supernatural, who's a friend, fans idolize these people. Why? why? And the idea of saying, okay, why don't we capitalize on that and have these individuals do something that is going to continue to provide for the better of the community. So the ability for an artist, a musician, an actor, an actress to record a 60-second video to their fans that gives fans an idea as to who they are and maybe a personal instance where they've been bullied or trolled and how they've responded to it. And that's really the heart of the Cyberbite movement, is connecting Silicon Valley and connecting Hollywood to the everyday person. Because if you're not going to sit and listen to your mom or dad, you're not going to sit and listen to a health professional that's just talking at you, listen to your idol, listen to your mentor, because maybe that's the only way that information will resonate with you.
I love that. I love that. And this was, I mean, you're talking about this, but this was something that when you rolled this out, I mean, you got coverage on MSNBC and Entrepreneur Weekly. It was, what is the CES 2019?
Sure. So CES is the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. It's the country's largest technology and electronics show. And coincidentally, CES 2020 starts on Monday next week, which I will be at. But this is where you have the best of the best from Samsung, LG, Apple, Deloitte, DLA Piper. You have every security and tech company in one place in the Las Vegas Strip, debuting and showing off the latest in their tech and incorporating a lot of the concerns that we have today: privacy, smart technology, artificial intelligence. And what a better time to speak on this type of area than at CES with all these tech companies. And I happened to bump into somebody from Entrepreneur Weekly, Alan Taylor, and I gave him a little pitch, and he was interested, and I was very grateful to have that opportunity to speak live on the carpet with Entrepreneur about the movement, and it's been wonderful.
I love that. I love that. It's weird how things happen. Sometimes it just comes into an alignment there, and there you are in front of the stage talking about something you love. So.
Definitely. And it's, you know what, those are the moments that you don't really want to watch pass by, and when those moments do come, you want to take advantage of every moment, especially when it's about giving back to the community and giving back to those that have allowed me to have my chance.
Absolutely. So, Andrew, let's kind of go back to when we were talking about CCPA, but even just the general topic of cybersecurity. So, for listeners, maybe they're not in California, but they are concerned about cybersecurity in general. What would you want to tell those listeners? What should we be aware of?
Sure. Great question. The first thing, and this is a story that's trending right now, we are in the year 2020. I'm sure all of us are having at some point to sign new agreements, revamping our agreements, signing the agreements. My biggest piece of advice right now is if you are signing a new contract, a new agreement, and you are dating that contract, please do not abbreviate the date. And what I mean by that is today is January, I think, 4th, if I'm not mistaken. Am I correct on that, or is it the 3rd? My day ahead?
Actually, your schedule's probably like mine. Yeah, no, it's the 3rd. You're a day ahead.
I'm the 3rd. For some reason, I missed a day. Uh-oh.
And I'm confused enough. I was like, all right, I better check my phone.
There you go. So, yes, today is January 3rd, 2020. A lot of us would abbreviate the date to 1/3/20. Do not abbreviate it to 20. The reason for that is it's very, very easy for a scammer or anybody to go take that agreement and then add on to that date. So if you and I sign an agreement right now, Chris, and I date that 1/3/20, what's to stop you or somebody from adding a 1 and a 7 at the end of that contract? Do you know what just happened? You just predated that 2020 contract and changed it to January 3rd of 2017.
Wow.
So the ability to really change the year 2020 into any year predating it, you have now ideally bound everybody to that agreement to a time that did not happen. And it's a very hard thing to prove. You know, can it be overcome? Absolutely. But why put yourself in that scenario? So to answer your question, first and foremost, just write out 2020. Do not abbreviate it because of that risk.
I wouldn't have even thought about that, and it's just when you I just wrote it down as you were talking, and it's very easy to just drop a whatever year you want at the end and alter a document.
Very much so. Whether it's a PDF, anything, it's very easy to go in and add that in. But on the topic of cybersecurity, own your data, and that's a phrase that has been picked up by Brittany Kaiser, who is one of the whistleblowers for the Cambridge Analytica scandal going on. She's a dear friend, and she has her own foundation. But what I like about that phrase of owning your data is understanding what data you have out there. Who are you giving it to? Why are you giving it to them? And if you can't figure out how many accounts you have online that are registered, how many social media networks you're registered to, how many online shopping platforms like Amazon you're registered to, that's a problem. So be cognizant, be smart, and just understand that every time you give up an email address or your name, it's going out to somebody somewhere. And just protect yourself.
So I know a lot of people don't even have that on their radar, the idea of owning your own data. That's huge. You also talked about the 2020, when you signed the contract to go ahead and put the full year on there. Don't leave it open. We've got just about 4 minutes or so left. I do want to give listeners a way to find out more about you. The podcast called Cyberbite, I was able to find it on Spotify, and then you also told me a Facebook for your law firm. What's the best Facebook page, I guess, to find out more?
Sure. So my Facebook is, you can find me by typing in Andrew L. Rossow, or go to the Facebook page, facebook.com/D Rossow Law. So that's DROSSOW law.com, and you can always email me at andrew@rossowlaw.com. I will answer every email I can. I hate it when people didn't answer me, so I try not to provide that same injustice to those who reach out. So I'm always here as a resource.
So as we were, so that is a good, and on the podcast notes, I'll make sure to have a link to that as well as a link to your podcast. I pulled up Brittany. When you mentioned Brittany Kaiser, that name sounded familiar, and I pulled her up on Google. And I had I want to say The Great Hack, or one of the documentaries. I was like, I had saw her, and in the bio it says she's from Houston. So
yes, she is.
I did not even know that.
We stick together, Chris. Us Texans, we always stick together.
It's that 6 degrees of separation thing. So wow. So going back just in the last few minutes of the show here, some of the things that you mentioned for people to have on their radar. We talked about the new California law. Were there anything from your opening episode when you talk about kind of things that people need to have on their radar? Any last tidbits you want to leave us with in the last few minutes here?
Sure. Just a couple things. There's going to be a lot of changes this upcoming year with social media. Of course, Facebook's been in the hot seat for quite some time. It still is. But so are the other networks. Okay? TikTok is recently under some heat as well. And my episode, I talked about how the U.S. Army has recently just banned its personnel from using TikTok on military or government-issued devices. And the reason for that is a security concern out of China. So again, on the mobile front, be careful of the apps you're downloading. Okay, even though they're on the Apple iTunes Store or the Android's Google Play Market, understand the information it's asking from you. So stay up to date on that stuff. I think one of the latest breaches was a convenience store called Wawa, WAWA, out on the East Coast, where all 800 of its stores, its payment processing unit, the credit card reader, was breached or accessed 9 months ago, and they're just now finding out about it. So, it's one of those things that it can happen to anybody, anywhere, and it will happen to somebody at some point. It's just a matter of when, not if. So, there's nothing wrong with looking up these breaches. I think there's something to be learned from every one of this, and it's accountability. And I think as we're in 2020 now, this is going to be the year of accountability for our most trusted organizations and companies that we've chosen to do business.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Money Matters Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, visit us on the web at www.moneymatterspodcast.com. Drop us a line on SpeakPipe on the right-hand corner. It will receive any voicemails, questions, thoughts, concerns that you have about the show. In addition to this, we recently launched a Patreon campaign. Click on the Donate Now tab to hit the tip jar and find out what Patreon's campaign is all about.